of his wife were devoted to ceremonial matters and enforcing the town's 35 miles an hour speed limit. The town supervisor, Walter Nash, a 79-year-old stick of a man who had held the job, also as an unpaid volunteer, for a shade under 40 years, was spending the weekend visiting his sister in Tyler Falls, way down in Dutchess County. Something about a big family picnic. As for the head of the Chamber of Commerce, there was none. Maud Terwilliger had served in that capacity ever since its inception, 11 years earlier. But when a bad case of gallstones had forced Maud to retire the winter before, the position, once again a voluntary unpaid one, had remained vacant. Not that anyone really noticed. Truth was, there really wasn't any commerce in Flat Lake except for a general store, a rod and gun shop, an outboard engine and snowmobile dealership, a diner, a filling station, and a few women who rented out rooms on a bed-and-breakfast basis. Thus, by a simple process of elimination, Bass McClure, the equally unpaid volunteer fish and game warden, had become the duty officer on call for the weekend. It should be noted that McClure's given name was not really Bass. He'd been born Brian Carlin McClure 57 years earlier, right there in Flat Lake. Or at least over in Mercy Hospital, which was located in Cedar Falls, the county seat and the only town of consequence for 50 miles, no matter which direction you drove. He'd taken up fishing and hunting and trapping as a youngster, pretty much to the exclusion of schoolwork, ignoring warnings from his parents and teachers that he'd never amount to anything but a mountain man. But in the prosperity of the 1980s, he'd found a living as a guide for hunters and sport fishermen who came up from Albany or New York City, or even Long Island in search of largemouth bass in summer, or deer, bear, and moose in winter. People had been calling him Bass for so long that almost nobody remembered his real name anymore. His driver's license identified him as Bass M. McClure. Even the plate on his old Jeep Renegade read Bass 1. Cost him an extra $18 every 2 years for that. As soon as he heard the phone ringing, McClure knew it had to be from headquarters, the way it rang 2 rings at a time, unlike an ordinary call. Ring, 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 ring. He reached out in the darkness and picked it up after the 3rd pair of rings, at the same time glancing at the red digital display of his clock radio. 5:13. He shut his eyes as soon as he had the receiver in his hand, but he continued to see a red 5:13 burned into his retinas. He wondered if it would turn to 5:14 when it changed on the clock radio, or if it would stay frozen at 5:13. "McClure," he said into the phone. For a moment there was silence. Then a boy's voice, or perhaps a young man's. "Hello? Hello?" Urgency was McClure's first impression. Urgency and confusion. "Who's this?" McClure asked, coming fully awake. "This is Jonathan Hamilton." McClure recognized not only the name, but the voice. He'd known Jonathan almost since the boy'd been born. Knew how, ever since the death of his parents, he'd lived alone with his grandparents on the family estate up on the north end of the lake. Even knew he'd been named after 2 uncles, John and Nathan. "Hello, Jonathan, this is Bass McClure." He tried to say it in as soothing a voice as he could, sensing right away that there was something the matter and wanting to calm the youngster. "Hello, Bass." "Is something the matter?" "Yes." "What's the problem, Jonathan?" "Grandpa Carter," he said, "and Grandma Mary Alice." "What about them?" McClure found himself talking as he would to a child. Jonathan Hamilton was close to 30 years old, but he was widely known to be slow. At least that was the charitable way of putting it. "They're hurt?" McClure would remember later that it was a statement all the way until the very end, when Jonathan's voice had risen, turning it into a question. "Hurt bad?" McClure asked. "Bad." "Real bad?" It took a moment before McClure got a response. When he did, it was an echo of his own words, but without the inflection, and without the question. "Real bad," Jonathan said. In the investigation that followed, Bass McClure would explain that the thought had occurred to him to call Mercy Hospital before heading over to the Hamilton place and suggest they have an ambulance meet him there. He'd also thought about ringing up the state troopers at the barracks on Route 30, but he dismissed both ideas and decided instead to go himself, without doing anything else other than slipping into his trousers and shoes and grabbing a windbreaker. As for his car keys,